In today's conversation, we chat with a couple who have managed to transform a hobby of collecting and growing seeds into trees for Zambia, a thriving tree nursery in Lusaka. They share how their plans are progressing on their latest project, the Chifwema Arboretum and Education Centre, through which they hope that we can all continue to learn about Zambian plants. Hi there, Nico from Greenspace Zambia. We're here with the owners of Trees for Zambia, Adam and Clare, and we're hoping to get a bit of information from them about their business and kind of what issues affect them. Hello, how are you guys today?
Very well.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for coming. Are you coming for Trees for Zambia?
Yeah, how long have you been operating Trees for Zambia?
I think about 25 years. And it sort of started with Adam collecting seeds in the bush. Every time he went to the bush, he'd collect some more seed, give them to Sam, who we talked to this morning. We planted them, and then suddenly we had a whole lot of trees.
And this was collecting mainly for establishing around the house and on the property?
No, it wasn't. It was just of interest. And so, you see something interesting in the bush, like chips, to collect the seeds, bring it back. And there's all this sort of myth that trees don't grow fast in Zambia.
Yeah.
And so I bring them back and we plant them up in sand. And suddenly there were these plants growing. And within the space of about 5 years, we had something like 150 different species.
Oh, wow. And were you collecting things that you knew what they were, or were you just kind of collecting?
Often not. So it was only later that we could figure out what they were. No, because I put them in my pocket, and that's some more in the pocket, and then some more in the pocket, and then they'd all go into a plastic bag, and all go into a paper bag, get into sand. And so it was only later on that we could actually figure out what.
Yeah.
And some of them we took some time to figure out.
Yeah, I can imagine. Some would take a decade or more to actually flower and be able to be identified.
But
we had Mike being to come.
Yeah.
Tell us.
And Mike was the type to be able to just tell based on leaf or a twig or something like that. 50 years experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's really where Claire came into the picture, because she said, "This is ridiculous."
Well, I attempted to retire.
We're getting completely out of hand. We can't carry on like this. So I said, "Well, I think that's actually true, and should become semi-commercial. So why don't you take it on as the marketing manager?"
It's a great retirement job, isn't it?
Well, it's been absolute hell. No, but then actually, I didn't. I mean, it puttered along, and it was subsidised to a certain extent. I mean, we Sam has been there from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Number also, 2 or 3 people, on and off, and it was just that part of the nursery. This is literally from last year or the year before that we've extended into the side of the track. And as we had a little bit of money in the account, we would put up a shed.
Yeah.
And then another shed. So we've got 3 sheds. But the money really comes from, it really comes from the landscape projects.
I think that's kind of true for most tree production, effectively. Yeah. It is landscapers who buy quite a bit at a time and have a large area to cover.
Yeah. And I was doing the landscaping as well. We got some landscaping contracts, which were really a great boost to step us up.
Yeah.
It also, it was learning on the ground, learning by doing, and also with sand. So I would go with Sam and did camping tents and cases. So we've done a very big campus out in Kawana, the Japanese tobacco industry, and they had another campus up in Chisamba, just come on the Chisamba Road up there, which is the training centre for essential workers, and that was huge as well. So they, that was very helpful in buying and also learning a lot about what trees they were and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, because if you're starting 20, 30 years ago, there wouldn't have been very much information available out there. I know people have been doing information into acacia propagation and whatnot because of the economic importance within, say, livestock industry and things like that. But was there very much at all about Calcilia or Nyasaka or any of those?
No. No, so it's been very much learning by doing, and I mean, I don't actually do it. I mean, and neither does Adam. but Sam is the doer, and he knows which trees are difficult to grow.
Yeah.
And we just have to believe him.
Yeah. Well, I can attest to definitely some of them are very difficult.
Yeah, very difficult.
Yeah.
We get them growing a little bit, and then that's it.
And then they die.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially the ones you want to. You can see they're endangered, and the ones you want to grow. And actually, we find it very difficult to grow indigenous fruit trees.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the reasons why a lot of these seedlings don't last is that they're not in the right soil habitats.
Yeah.
They particularly stuff from Western Province. If you're trying to grow things in Kalahari sand, that's not in Kalahari sand, and it's calcareous red loam.
Yeah.
Then they just give up the ghost very quickly. But other stuff, a lot of the northern trees like conformity and so on are in acidic soils.
Yeah.
So bring them here onto even same to the soil type, but it's much more calcareous.
Yeah.
And they then just don't either set. So there are fundamental problems that material that are trying to find ways of getting a variant that will grow in the habitat and try to reproduce.
Yeah. Does the amount of rainfall then also make a difference in that sense? Because soil aside, northern province and northern areas will get a lot more rainfall than...
No, sure. Yeah. And then you can compensate for that with watering when you're growing them into seedlings. But the thing is, as the water is also calcareous, you've got gone pH on it, then you've got a problem straight away. So it's a number of these issues that in looking at them, really what we need to do, I think, is to have specialists. So having set aside one of these greenhouses should be set aside for growing stuff in sort of acidic conditions.
Mm-hmm.
And there we have to have a water filter systems and take the pH
Yeah.
as much as possible. And then try and get substrate, but these could get things up to
approximate
or something like that.
Yeah.
Where they might have a chance to survive.
Yeah, I mean, yes, that would be for kind of scientific purposes, rather than keeping this business going.
Well, but conservation, I would imagine as well, because especially in like Brachystegia areas, I don't know about your experiences, but in my experiences, a lot of Brachystegia woodland trees are some of the more difficult to grow.
Very difficult.
They will germinate, but they get to that 2, 3, 4 leaf stage, and then it's almost like programmed death, effectively.
One of the interesting stories with that actually is when we first got here. All of this was obviously farmland previously, and there's still remnants of the old contour canals from the 50s and so on, which you had to have on your property if your slope was more than whatever it was degrees.
Yeah.
But the Brachystegias, apart from one big mother tree near our gate, had disappeared because they'd all been taken up. And so we thought, well, let's try and reintroduce some Brachystegias. The only one that was on the property was Spiciformis. So we managed to germinate some, and we actually managed to get a few to grow, and we planted them up. I think we planted something like Clare. When it was like 25 years ago, something like that.
Yeah.
And I've actually been measuring growth rates on the last sort of 10, 15 years. And quite interesting. Even they grow faster than you think.
I would imagine they do, but it's a kind of idea of our passage of time and understanding it.
Yeah.
It's not like seeing a child which hits that growth spurt and you can almost see it in a year that they aren't so much, whereas these just
But what's really interesting now is how the Spiciformis all the way through that patch of bush then.
Oh, really?
Now, whether that's, from seed transmission from another tree, or whether, some of these trees have now started to fruit and seed, and seed dispersals from them. But there's no sort of logical pattern to it. It's really interesting. And that's one of the things that'd be really good to get in some guys and or one of the universities to come and do a sort of bit of long-term study on it, see what's going on.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned about how you've been planting trees in what is now the Arboretum.
Yeah.
Have you noticed species that you didn't plant that have come in outside of your introduction? Has there been a bit of...
not really.
That one that Quinton found.
No, but they've been here.
Oh,
so they're always here. So one of the things with the Arboretum is there needs to be some kind of story to it. And so, there's the whole thing about soil soil mycorrhiza and all the rest of it, and then different types of tree fauna and so on. But the other one is habitats. Because if we're trying to replicate different habitats around the country, it'd be quite good to sort of grow those sort of species in an area, and they could say, "Oh, this is classic. This is Monga woodland. This is a bit of Nyomba woodland. That's a bit of Kalahari woodland." So one of the things we're trying to do is plant some stuff into areas to create that kind of thing. It's an artificiality, but they're all indigenous trees, so that we're not introducing any invasives. And they probably won't survive.
I was going to ask, are you going to bring in some of the truckloads of Kalahari sand?
They're not getting.
But it's so we're trying to do that, but we haven't. And to be quite honest, I haven't really spent a lot of time in this part of the operation. But I haven't noticed anything there that is new. This all of it is secondary growth. This is recovered from, and what's really interesting is how diverse it is.
Yeah. Well, would you say the recovery is from seed, or is it actually from root pieces?
I think it's both. Yeah. And how long a bit of root could stay underground without showing any signs of complete dormancy and then suddenly start germinating is one of the interesting questions. So I suspect there's quite a lot of that.
I would think so too, because of, in my experience, you'll see an area that is just looking like grassland or something like that. And the minute it stopped burn, within 2 years, you actually see decent sized woody shoots that have popped up. And there's no large tree of that type around enough. Must have been essentially roots.
But I think what is interesting is from a reforestation point of view, actually you don't need to go out and plant. If you just leave land and accept it, you make to it, it can generate. And more what it died when it generates is very diverse. As it began over another 50 years, it would revert back into back to Caesar William or whatever.
The succession meeting.
Yeah, the succession back. But there is root.
Yeah, once humanity disappears, that happens.
Well, yes.
I guess what I'm always in awe of is that even though this Brachystegia species, or woodland species, always seems to be slightly more interesting and diverse than most other types of woodland that that there's more species of tree that seem to grow in that habitat by comparison.
And that must be a succession that I assume that gradually as the whole process establishes itself, some species do better than others and muscle the others up.
Yeah. Definitely if you introduce fire into the mix, that starts to really quickly select for intolerant tolerance.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the other thing that's it's going to happen increasingly is changes related to rainfall. And one of the things we've noticed here is a lot of paranaris have died off.
Is it?
And
older ones or of all ages?
All ages. So whether that is some kind of parasitic virus or whatever it is issue, or whether it's related to drought conditions, but noticeably, the drought we had a couple of years ago got a serious one, and they were the ones that we noticed most seriously affected from. So I think that's beginning is going to start happening as well.
Where you will see kind of local extinction of certain species as that happens. Because I remember Mike Bingham talking about the drought affecting Uapaka and Suku in some way that, after drought, you have a lot of deaths of the older trees, and then if there's enough of a young population, it might recover if if rainfall patterns return, but if not, it might be actually wiped out in the whole area.
Well, I think it applies, the whole Nyomba ecoregion is going to be interesting to watch, because some of those trees are definitely going to struggle out. But and if that changes, then what else happens? And what of the emergence and come out of it, and where the opportunist species will creep in. So
there's enough of them though in the end, isn't it? That's various acacias and things like that.
I mean, that's the great thing about diversity, is that it doesn't matter what gets thrown at the system, but at least something there that will come in and fill the gap to near some.
Yeah. How will the Arboretum be operated? Are you going to be having that open on a regular, like a weekly schedule for people to come and visit?
Well, we're in very early days now. We had a tree walk with Quinton Allen a couple of Saturdays ago. And I think more events like that to begin with. It is kind of open to people if they want to come around. But we're having we're hoping to have an official opening in October when we will launch the book. At the same time, we've done the Penguin have published a book, Trees of Zambia, and we are the Girls. And I can tell you, it was a lot of work. And what we're hoping to do is to form a relationship with other NGOs, conservation NGOs, that will
complement what you're doing.
Bring certainly on the education front, because really what we're about is about education. It's about conservation. It's about the natural world. It's about educating children and adults, in fact.
All right, we've shifted. It was getting a little hot in our previous location, so now we're doing a bit of a shift, and we'll kind of continue talking to Adam and Clare about, this time with the Arboretum that they have developed and what their kind of vision and goals for that are.
The Arboretum really came out to the fact that we have got this land here, and what to do with it. We could sell it, I suppose. We can put a block making factory on it, make a lot of money, a petrol station even. But we decided we didn't want to do that. We wanted to keep it as it has been. So it has been left for about 20, 30, 40 years, 50 years.
No, I mean, parts of it would be cultivated when we bought it. Remember?
Yeah, it was actually, yes. The bottom bit was, I did actually have things, but sweet potatoes and things growing in it. So that's 30 years ago. So we've actually left it 30 years. So it's very regrowth from the 30 years. And having visited arboretum elsewhere in the world, in particular Western Belt in the UK, and all over the world actually, we were very inspired, and because they're such a valuable education tool to have for that most children in all over the world don't have the opportunity to go and touch bark and learn about bark and see the difference between that bark and that bark, and with leaves and the flowers, and the ideas of the sort of education board and talking about the science of a plant and all that. And then as we were discussing and talking, other people made fantastic suggestions. We got a geologist friend. We said we must have a geology exhibition and get these huge rocks from all over Zambia, which we will try and do.
The relevance of that is that the vegetation types are very strongly linked to the underlying geology. So that's where the story comes in.
So it's a bit of a tie back into the parent material that will make the soil, which that tree is.
And nowhere in Zambia do we have Zambia rocks on exhibition. And Zambia rocks, I mean, it's what Zambia is built on, and it's what is made Zambia. I mean, you talk about gemstones, you talk about copper, you talk about, well, everything. So we just thought that would be a good addition to it. And then part of the Arboretum, we're going to have a memorial celebration park, which is where people can plant trees in celebration of an event, like having a baby or somebody's life. Or an occasion, like
wedding. I suppose a wedding in the Arboretum, plant a tree.
Yeah, exactly.
Hopefully you're still together 50 years later to come and celebrate.
Exactly. What would you die? I don't know. But at the moment we're kind of very much in the early stages. We've reached level 1 accreditation for ARBNet, which is an international organization based in the US, because we fulfill their criteria. So they give us the criteria for each level arboretum. So we're level 1, And obviously, I mean, I think level 5, that's really kind of disaster, but I think Zambia reaches level 5, that's Gerstenbosch standard, probably even higher. If we reach that, there's no reason why we shouldn't.
Yeah.
Let me say that. But I mean, Gerstenbosch is huge. But you know,
It's also 100+ years old by now. It's at that stage.
so it's a legacy. So in 100 years' time, I'm hoping your grandchildren will be sitting there saying, "My dad did a video. There's a funny old couple there." And now look at it.
We'll have a picture of you on the wall, don't worry.
Yeah, I think so. Or a tree.
But I think it needs to develop incrementally. So we don't really know, where it's going. What would be really nice is to have a story about plant ecology, tree ecology, and so on and so forth. And that's going to be partly have to be in the field, so that as you're walking around, that there's an area of interest that you can explain what's going on in there. But then some of it will need to be in an educational facility. Where it's easier to bring stuff together, it's more weather fruit and all that sort of stuff. So we, so thinking that through and trying to figure it out and how much it's going to cost and, what sort of time frame. But in the meantime, we need to have a system where people can come and start enjoying it. So we need to, there is a network of paths here. We need to start giving some directions at how you find your way around it and how you find it. And then start labeling some important locations in it as a starting point. We've already labelled, I think, 25 trees.
No, more than 50, between 50 and 100.
One of them happened to be, one of them is a carob tree.
Oh, really?
No, and you take that label.
There was just like this one.
But an arboretum doesn't all have to be indigenous.
No,
it wasn't. But it looks very similar to it. But it's so we, there's this sort of process of weeding out the sort of errors and things like that. But it's so that's process has started. So as soon as there's enough information, you can do that. The other thing you need, and an interesting part of this came out of this tree walk, is that you need somebody with the skills to be able to tell people what's going.
Yeah.
You need a trail guide. And we had, I don't know, only about 11 people with us and 12 people in the group. But if you were at the front of the group, you couldn't, you were at the back of the group, you couldn't, they were saying in the front of the group. So the other thing is just devising the number of the size of groups and things like that, what sort of groups they are, and things like that. So that so all of that needs to be learnt as well, and we need to sort of go back and see how other people do it, so you don't have to completely reinvent the head.
And adapted to an African system, I would imagine as well.
We're hoping to have a kind of, as you say, Friends of the Arboretum system, where people will pay an annual fee and they can come anytime they like. And we're also hoping to build a volunteer network where students or Togololo club members or what was the other one, Chipendale club members can come and train a little bit to be a guide and to take groups of people around and and enjoy that role. And so I mean that's kind of the idea, the long-term idea.
Well, I think Zambia is lacking, like, did you say the birds is no, there seems to be endless amount of money for birds and people who are interested in the birds. On the floral side, that tapers off quite quickly. And then when you separate out, say, trees from herbaceous plants, there's even greater separation between those. So having actually a place that could allow people to come and have a space where you can see both effectively would be very useful around Lusaka, as Lusaka is somewhat of a central kind of point for people to come and spend their time when they're back from the valley or from wherever.
And also, tourists, as they, they have a day or something in Lusaka, they go out and see the little baby elephants in the national park there, and then pop in here and it's like half an hour, sing around. And
Lusaka has got so little open space there, green open space.
And disappearing even faster.
And disappearing at a rate of knots. So just, to come and just sort of sit on a bench under a tree and, hopefully not have too much block-making noise, traffic noise in the background. But, it's something that, there's some people who really appreciate.
So it reminds me of the Japanese kind of concept of forest bathing. I can't remember their name for it at the moment, but that ability to get out, even though you might hear, because urban sounds, there's almost nowhere you can escape them nowadays, but just to be out and around and feel, the breeze through the trees and hear the rustling of it, like what we're hearing underneath these trees now, does provide, somewhat of a revitalization.
And we definitely have that sort of aspect to it. We went to, actually it was at Gardens, you remember, in Scotland, and they had like a shack with a whole lot of yoga mats for forest bathing. It's a very cheap thing to do.
Well, here you can use grass mats, right? You get some grass mats.
You just have some and help yourself to a grass mat, go and lie under a tree. And
can I have a forest bathing hammock?
yeah, it's not a bad idea, actually. And also, the rocks is one thing, and the forest bathing and the activities, and also the education boards as you go around, and sculptures.
Yeah.
By local artists. I mean, we've got one there and another one, and it's just a start. That would be, great. We've got a couple of volunteers who are coming, in this month, September, October time, to help us develop some education boards, which we will hopefully. The Elephant Charge have sponsored us for that.
And this is for the grand opening. Yeah. Or at least the soft opening, in October. Yeah.
And there will be something here by October, whatever it is, the opening.
Are you going to be announcing that anywhere on your website, or is there going to be some so people can find that out?
We'll have to make an invitation list.
Okay.
And put it out there.
Yeah.
Because it'll be the book launch as well.
Yeah.
Our book launch.
So book launch and Arboretum soft opening at the same time.
At the same time.
Oh, lovely.
Well, Arboretum opening, let's say that. But I think we'll put a tent up there and have a bit of a function. Mm-hmm. Maybe on a sort of 4 or 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. Going into
time for sundowners.
Maybe a bit of a walk around, and then sundowners and I don't know. We haven't really thought about it until you have to take her head.
To be announced.
And Penguin have said they'll help a little bit towards that. So that's really good news for us.
And where are the tree books going to be available through?
They'll be available in Bookworld. The distributor, they're going to be distributed by a distributor in Zambia who distributes the other pocket guides and a lot of educational materials, actually, for beginners. We don't want to get into the distribution of this.
Yeah.
We've ordered 200 copies for ourselves, and that will be donations to people like yourself who've helped us with the book, which I thank you very, very much.
My pleasure.
And also, we'll send a few from here. And they'll be for sale on the scene. Yeah. So,
how can people get in touch with you if they are then interested in either the Arboretum or the nursery? What is the best way?
Well, we've got a website, Trees for Zambia website. There's also a Chifwema Arboretum website. We just put that in. Good luck. But there's usually a contact. There is a contact email or phone number there. We also have a presence on Instagram and Facebook, Trees for Zambia. And that usually comes through to my telephone.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you accept donations of seed or plants that people might have? Like, I'm assuming being an arboretum, you grow anything and everything you can get. So would it be the same kind of issue if somebody says, I have access to the seed, and I donate it? You take that?
Absolutely. Every now and again, actually, and if people come along with a bag to a seed and say, Jim, don't know what to do with it.
And then you grow it, and it's...
Yeah, one hopes it's not something that you don't want effectively, but...
It's quite funny. We were going through the nursery here the other day. And there are a whole lot of acacias at this end. Lo and behold, what's flowering? Mimosa figure.
That was mine.
Did you collect the seeds?
Yes, I did. Isn't it terrible?
Well, at least you could realize that fairly early on, and that's not out the norm with somebody.
Anyway, so invasive species, we avoid those.
Is there kind of plans maybe within the Arboretum to do a bit on invasive woody species that occur in Zambia?
We could do that, I suppose. The problem is then you need to control.
Well, and maybe not necessarily growing it, but
a display. No, certainly there's a display. I mean, one of the curious things is, although there's a kind of unofficial list of invasive plants in Zambia, it's never been officialized. And some of the plants, including, outside their front doors of wildlife, for example, which tells you all you need to know. So it's there's a lack of awareness of issues on invasive plants.
Yeah.
And the extent to which mimosa pigro is just spread across the whole country is alarming. I mean, it is really in a very short space of time. Is really scary.
Yeah.
So
and just to add on that, you see lantana.
Well, I think when you say mimosa, unless you're in the industry and you know about mimosa, most people won't. But lantana is one that everybody knows.
And lantana you see growing in people's gardens, and they've kept them
There's
with
a hedgerow and stuff, yeah.
And you think, yes, wow. But when you go out to these sort of derelict farms, which I call them derelict, and there's just lantana absolutely everywhere, and
Impenetrable thicket.
Absolutely, and it's just terrible, and nothing's done by the owners of the land because it's spread so easily. So we don't grow in the nursery. We don't grow any jacaranda. People love it, but it's hugely, massively invasive here. Well, we will not grow it. But we do grow spathodia, which is also quite invasive. But
can be in the right circumstances.
Yeah, which is the African tulip tree, but it's very beautiful, and it's East African, and it's sort of near. Jacaranda comes from
India. South America.
So the spathodia, we kind of say, okay.
In fact, it's the interesting thing about a lot of these endangered species or invasive species is they're endangered in their home countries.
Yeah.
Like eucalyptuses in Australia. And then we have the flamboyant, which people also love, and they add a lot to our streets. And we do have a few of those. So the spathodia and the...
But I think in an arboretum setting, it is important to include those as examples of what does grow, and they are exceedingly ornamental. I think then being able to provide background for people on how thirsty they are as plants is probably the biggest important factor on that side of it.
Exactly.
Because I've never really seen jacaranda escape here to the same extent that other things can, and same with flamboyant. Whereas something like Tacoma stands can spread very, very quickly, or Melia as a direct can spread very quickly.
Linas too.
Melina too, in certain instances, yeah.
And we have seen jacaranda in the memorial park. It was an old farm, and they had jacaranda trees around the farm with it there. And there must be thousands. And of course, the owners of the memorial park like jacaranda, and they say, no, we're not removing that. I said, but they're absolutely so now he's planted jacaranda, and we planted Kaya Nasuka in between.
So hopefully one will overgrow the other.
So we must go and have a look and see how let's hope.
They're probably pouring acid onto the ISE.
No, I think it's doing very well.
I think the one kind of shame with a lot of our indigenous is that it doesn't have that large, showy flower to the same extent. And it isn't to say that they don't. Erythrina, Dombea, they all have very showy flowers. But for whatever reason...
Pterocarpus.
Yeah, exactly. But for whatever reason, they don't seem to have that pull for people to the same extent.
But often they don't flower for very long. I mean, Dombea is a bit better, but some of them are very short. Especially
Pterocarpus, as you say. You go one day it's full of yellow, the next day it's all on the ground. It's like...
Yes, and the spazodias flower all months.
Yeah.
And the flamboyant for months.
There's a really interesting story on that, actually. There's a guy called Marx, well, then he's dead now, but Brazilian, who was given the job of doing the landscaping for Brasilia when they first built it. And he said, look, we need to have indigenous plants here. And so he trundled off into the Amazon and collected a whole lot of plants that he thought would be really good to put in. And gradually that evolved, and they realized the same sort of problem with flowering. And so they started cultivating, some species to try and extend the flowering period and things like that. I mean, that's something that could be done here. I mean, pterocarpus are, especially rotundifolius, is spectacular.
Yeah.
If you could get that to flower over a month instead of a week, it'd be amazing. So, so there's all that sort of stuff that could be done as well.
Oh.
But it's
But also kind of turning around and planting a varied mix to have different things come and flower at the different times. Because it is starting now. Yeah. We've seen the Dombea, the Erythrina starting.
Yeah.
Shortly in the next few weeks to months, Ochnas will be coming in. Yeah. I think it's also getting people around into the idea of succession.
Yeah, sure.
Like one of the reasons I love indigenous plants is because you can kind of tell what season you're in based on what's come up in flower.
Exactly.
And it is so nice to know as the Dombeas come out in flower to say, winter is now behind us and our spring and summer are coming on.
That's right.
So getting people around to that appreciation for the flowering times being an indicator of certain times of year, which if you live in an area where you have a green lawn all year round, I feel like you kind of lose out on. You don't notice that passage.
No, I think that's true. I mean, and it's something it's it's sort of intuitive, but it needs putting out there. And it's only when you start walking around and notices things like that it starts coming to you, and so it needs that educational aspect to explain what's going on. And even smells, you wander around now, starting to warm up, this wonderful smell of earth, and rotting litter and things like that.
Yeah.
These are sort of,
and the scent, the scent of the flower.
So it's there's just a whole lot out there, and so the clever bit is actually making it interesting for people without overpowering them with information. At the same time, just opening their experiences to which
even allowing them to discover those things, and then there's a little interpretive sign saying, if you're smelling it, it's this kind of scenario. It kind of brings you back to that kind of wonder of the natural world that you generally tend to have when you're young, and as you grow up, you kind of lose a little bit more of it.
Absolutely.
And does it come back in your second use, do you think? I mean,
well, I like to think that I never lost it enough.
No, I mean, maybe I did, but because literally one thing I idea, and just seeing the sort of Rhidinas coming out with their new leaf, it's stunning.
Well, I think the thing that I find is so interesting, especially if you leave an area, is that you can walk around it every year and you'll find something new that you didn't see the previous year. So when I came back to Zambia, I'd walk around our place, which has got fairly large wild areas, not as large as here. But to this day, I'm still finding things that I haven't seen before. And whether or not they've come in since that time or that I just wasn't there at that right time to see them,
absolutely,
it still feels like that little level of magic to be like, oh, look, this is here, effectively. And it's amazing the variety that is out there. It's still amazing me to this day. Have the attitudes to planting indigenous changed over the last 25 years since you've been operating Trees for Zambia?
I think one of the interesting things, apart from the large volume sales, one of the things that happened as soon as government housing was privatized is people's gardens became important. And a lot of our sales are to people's gardens in it. And there's a real, we get telephone calls saying, have you got this, have you got that, and so on. So, that knowledge has really expanded dramatically over the last 10, 15 years.
Has it also changed with the advent of Facebook and Instagram? Have you noticed an increase?
Well,
I'd ask me.
I will say that it has changed from people wanting to, lots of people still just want palms. And when they ask for a landscaping, a quote for a landscaping project, and we suggest trees, and we prepare it, and then the next time you drive past there, and there's 3 palms sort of sticking up, and you think, well, what a shame. But the converse is also true. People are much more interested in, becoming more interested in planting indigenous trees, to be more diverse and to be more in tune with nature and stuff like that. I mean, Mark O'Donnell is a person in question. When he started Bonanza, He was just looking for thousands of plants. And somebody, I think I said this morning, somebody said, no. And they've got that wonderful 3 rows of Kayas, red mahoganies going up the main drag into Bonanza that, are large. Mm-hmm. And he's planted thousands of trees, indigenous trees from us, and he buys 500 every year without fail. So that's amazing. And as I said, JCI wanted indigenous trees put into their campus, and I'm trying to think. Well, we haven't done any landscaping, but in the car parks now, you notice in the centro you have a lot of. But instead of having hibiscus and palms, we've got trichelea, we've got winslow mahogany, we've got the Clare. So that to me is good.
Yeah.
And the cars in that car park are well shaded, will be well shaded. Whereas on East Park, they've got what are those trees called? They've got the Shiva trees, and they've got a few acacias.
I think what I've noticed in car parks and those kinds of public spaces is that in having them essentially in a raised area, you reduce the amount of water that can get to them. You think that it'd dry out so quickly, whereas I know in parts of the West, they're now angling drainage towards the trees for them to actually get more water.
That's a standard flood mitigation technique now. They just create these sinks.
I definitely know some malls in Zambia that could use that. In some of our heavy rainfalls, all of a sudden the car park is almost completely flooded.
Many more, for example, also got.
I wasn't going to name them.
No, but they've got some of our indigenous trees. Because the landscaper there, she's got radullias on the outside and may have efficiencies and milk. And a bareback one, of course. Eureka Park, which is that shopping centre on the left, that was filled as well as then became spectacular.
Just after the Linda turnoff.
Yes. Well, you planted all those trees. They're big now.
I think I actually saw them cutting 1 or 2 of them back the other year, effectively.
So. I would think so. We were green and we had no idea what we were doing. So, but those trees are there. Yeah. And there's trichelea in the middle of the car park. Are there and that perspective. And I think on the whole, people are becoming more aware of putting local stuff in.
I think there is a kind of international move to try and do this sort of stuff too. And the whole biodiversity initiative is starting to have impacts at a corporate level. So if you're a big corporate, then you need to tick boxes.
I was going to say corporate social responsibility at that stage, effectively, which is a good thing. But it is one of those kinds of scenarios too that one would hope it moves beyond just the corporate into greater social acceptance and this idea.
Carbon thing, If people just looked after the landscape, then you wouldn't need all this carbon once,
Yeah, but I think the hoops to jump through on those kinds of things are such that some people say it's not worth it, and I will just clear and plant my maize or plant whatever it is that I'm going to plant in a short time. What I would hope is that we can develop a greater sense of pride in people to actually develop that biodiversity even on their own plot.
No, for sure.
Like every year I want to plant new things and have things in there that I know are going to come up and not just grow well, but add to the biodiversity, add to wildlife enhancements, whatever fruit trees will grow, indigenous fruit trees that will grow, bee pollinator, pollination, and just to try and, for my own enjoyment, as you say, to walk through and to see a ghost tree and then to see a peeling bark acacia or something that then provides you that interest in the dry season.
Well, I think the other thing is that social media can do an awful lot there. So, you set up a network and people can exchange information. So, and then it sort of gathers pace, doesn't it? You've got that. It's funny to say, peer pressure and all that to be.
Keeping up with the James.
So this is our social media, right?
But it's so I think there's a lot of. There are a couple of networks of WhatsApp networks of tree people and so on. The tree huggers, whatever they're called. So I think putting feeds into that sort of stuff, is one way of pushing that along a bit.
And bringing up public awareness and stuff, especially too. Well, before we kind of sign off, what are top 5 trees that you would then recommend for a small plot or a larger plot where somebody can then play around with obviously larger species?
For a small plot,
For a small plot. Let's start with a small plot.
I would say the Croton gratuitous. It's always got interest. It doesn't get too big, with lumby umbrella, and it grows quite fast. I would say also a Trichelia metica. It doesn't take up that much space. It's evergreen. It's dark green, so it's dark shade. And one would take up about a width of about 8 meters, a height of about 8 meters, so sort of lollipop shape like that.
No.
And how small is it? If you put it in front of me, if you want light to come.
Yeah, well, let's cap it at 1 acre. Something.
Oh yeah, well, so we would definitely put 1 acre is quite a lot.
It is actually. Okay, let's say half an acre.
Okay, whatever. Well, 1 acre, yeah. I mean, 1 acre I'd put in. Well, Dombea definitely. We've done Dombea in townhouses in Lusaka, and we've planted like 3 together. So it's a group, either in a row or in a round, so that you get the flowering, and it's quite spectacular. And so much so that people used to phone me up and say, "What was the name of that tree that you planted outside that house?" So that was good. And the the Erythrina does get very big, but it's
also quite slow growing. I mean, that is one tree is slow growing.
It is slow. Sausage tree. We planted some in the garden club in Lusaka. We can put a sausage tree in. We put an Erythrina, Dombea. And I mean, now you go there and people are sitting under them eating their lunch. Yeah, it's very gratifying. And that's a pretty small area in that tree. So on a bigger plot, I mean, the ficus species, you would never ever put on a small plot. You'll see why it will go up and see.
Yeah, its roots would get everywhere basically, and
and certainly into your swimming pool, into your drains.
So you're choosing the genus ficus at that stage, not even any specific one.
No, anything. I mean, the funny guy, our drains. Remember our drain? It just, this fibrous root just went straight through into our septic tank.
Yeah.
And it grew, but nothing else went down.
All of that extra fertilizer for it just took off, isn't it?
So that was, so don't put them anywhere near the house. Any ficus species. They're neat. They're big.
Very iconic.
But they are neat. Their roots don't do anything. They're very shallow roots. They're not thirsty.
Basically a big succulent at that stage, isn't it? Yeah. But it does get to a big size over time, 1,000 years later. So.
But well, not that much later. I mean, that one there is only 20 years old.
But to the grotesque, lovely, interesting shaped ones, who knows actually what the age of those?
Yes, I mean they're ancient, aren't they? 2,000-3,000 years. So on farms, it depends. Basically, we've provided trees for rehabilitation of we call it centre pivots.
Okay.
So we send a variety of acacias, and some things like brydelia. The albizias, whole host of different things, because you want to have the diversity and you want fairly tough things.
The pioneer species that get the big started and allow the others to come in over time.
Yeah, the trias and stuff. And the nitrogen fixers, of course, the acacia and albizias one. Yeah. I think that's more or less it. The windake, for example, the kaya is really useful for that, and for shading over chicken sheds, because they have a very big canopy. Straight one there, straight up, and then like that. I don't know. Have you got anything to add, Mr. Pope?
No, I think you've covered the ground quite well. I mean, one of the trees I quite like is tream orientalis. And it's got lovely dappled shade, and it grows reasonably quickly.
I think that's also one that people would have to see it.
Yeah.
Because it's not something that really sticks out in most people's minds. It's not a sausage tree or something like that that is kind of iconic.
No, it's not.
No, it's not. And but you see, there's one outside ISL admin block, and it's great because it's there. I think it might be planting quite a few trees in ISL.
Probably.
Because we've been planting trees there, and there's a booming shed right outside the classroom.
Oh, is there?
I think, well, anyway, but the tree was right outside there, and it's great because it's a really good example. Actually, there's a picture of it of how it can form a really good shade.
Yeah.
And and at ISL we've planted all the way around the block down Nangwenya Road, up that road, and then along the other road, and all that way.
So following the renovations and things like that they did there, is it?
That new road. And so when you drive along Nangwenya Road, you'll suddenly come across lovely big Trichelea dragianum sort of in there.
Oh, lovely.
And then we put at the back, we put in a lot of flowering trees, pick up around the linears. Flowering trees, Bohemians, really nice for small garden.
Yeah.
Pink jacaranda is extremely slow.
Yes.
And will it ever flower? I don't know. We've got them planted.
Well, you do it for the biodiversity, not for the flowers.
I'm thinking for the flowers for small garden. And flowering trees for the small garden. Acacia careers really.
Yeah, I think one of the things that hasn't been really, we certainly haven't done is to look at all the shrubs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because there's some quite nice flowering shrubs. They have the same problem of being short duration flowering.
Yeah.
But,
But again, it's to figure out the time of year that they flower and plant them. I've actually noticed on my Forechia this year, I'm getting flower buds forming for the first time. Really, almost 10 years after planting them, I'm really looking forward to these little flowers come out. So, and you're right, there's very little attention that's been paid, to the more shrubby material by comparison.
So we grow a lot of shrub in the nursery. We grow the brevia, the 3 different species of grevia, and the Tumbriton, the Overwatton, the
Microphyllum,
and the fragrance, which are untidy, scrabbly things, but they're great for water.
Some of them actually lend themselves quite well to being cut back. I grow Cumbretta mossambitense, and it's a multi-stem thing now, but it's probably about that wide with the many stems that have come up. And every year towards the late or mid-dry season, I cut it back, and then it reshoots. And I do that to controlling, obviously, its climbing tendencies. I don't want it to climb trees.
So we're sitting on by one here.
Mm-hmm. And they're fantastic with those kinds of flowers, just as the hot season starts to come on and things like that.
And of course the Onkovo, which we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
And Cambago, we've put just beginning to grow.
The blue type or not the Zeylanica, our indigenous Zeylanica,
No. And so the Checamaria and other indigenous stuff, all the Aphantes and stuff, indigenous southern African, the clivias, the pectantras, the aloes. We do put aloe seeds in the bush, and we are using a hybrid diet. We'll have a look at those ones over. So I think the shrubs is something, again, the Dombea bird, which is actually a shrub with a pink flower.
Yeah. Dombea is a highly ornamental species.
And they have these flowers, and the flowers sit on the tree or on the bush.
Even when they dry, they're quite ornamental. Very much like a hydrangea. We should start calling it the African or Zambian hydrangea.
We should. And then we'd sell lots. So we'll change its name to that. But we were talking to this woman who got near Sonoma, where they went this morning to look stuff. So there's a pink Dombea. And they've gone to look through the seeds, and the woman, she's very possessive about her pink Dombea, which is good.
Yeah.
And
but this is also an important thing in getting some of these things more widely grown, is to identify those that are slightly different, and especially more ornamental in that sense, and being able to propagate and pass them around.
Hopefully we'll get the pink. But she was saying, oh no, she cuts the flowers, they stay on the tree a long time. She even cuts the dry flowers, but they kind of stay pink. Takes them to church every Sunday, and she decorates the church for them.
It's a nice story.
But one of the nerdy things I did when we were doing this is to try and figure out how many registered or acknowledged tree species there were in Zambia.
Yeah.
And I didn't think it, looking at the BGCR. It's
Free net.
but
Is it online?
so I went through the flora of Zambia, you know, bump every single gem, and there are so many spectacular shrubs in there that we just know nothing about and don't use.
Well, and we never had that development of horticultural industry like they have in South Africa as well.
Yeah.
You know, I think if we did, there'd be actually quite a wealth of material that from Zambia would actually be spreading around.
Absolutely.
Alvisia in the Lamiaceae family is an absolutely stunning flower, and unless you know about it and stumble across it, it's just something that's, you know, out of sight, out of mind, effectively. And you're right. In the Lamiaceae family, there's dozens of shrubs that are quite. I always keep an eye on that Rothica, potential Rothica.
Yes.
Underneath the Brachystesia.
Yes. We'll remember it. In fact, I'll show Adam.
Pippi, shush.
Sorry.
That's quite all right. Well, I think
Should we get out? What?
I was gonna just say, I'd just like to thank you, Adam and Claire, for your time and for giving us a little bit more insight into Trees for Zambia, into what's happening with the Arboretum. So we'll keep close watch on that, and definitely come around to see when that is more open and operational, even just a forest bathe at this time of year, which is always very nice. And we will definitely keep a lookout for your Trees of Zambia book. Hopefully in the next few weeks it should be available, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. It'll be up in the next couple of weeks.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
It was very
Thank you.
exciting. Thank you. You're going to have to cut the coals.